All right, hi guys, welcome to another workshop for Kitty Lorum, where we're going to be talking about fundraising for nonprofit organizations. Today's topic is going to be annual fund and building a communications plan. I just want to remind you guys that next Wednesday we won't have one because it's our golf tournament, but we will see you guys on September 28th, and it'll be creating a development plan that works. Kitty is the sorry, I got it wrong. Sorry. Kitty is the Senior Director of Philanthropy at SSM Health Cardinal Glennon Children's Foundation. So hi Kitty, you can take over whenever you'd like.
Okay, I'll take it away. Thanks so much, Miguel.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to share this information with the Hispanic Chamber and your community. I am very passionate about what I do for a living. I feel that fundraising is a calling. It's definitely not something I anticipated doing with my career or with my life's journey, but it found me, and I find it to be very fulfilling, and it is joyful to me to share it with others. And I do believe that there are wonderful things that that if anyone's interested in learning more, I'd be happy to share further details. And this series is designed to inspire further conversation, further interest, to be a resource. As you know, it is recorded. You're probably watching it on a recording right now. So if there is interest in future Zoom or even in-person webinars where we use a specific example of a Hispanic chamber organization that would like to put the information that you learned today in action, we will definitely make that available. So again, this is designed to inspire those organizations that make our community a much better place. And the Hispanic Chamber is such a resource that it's a pleasure to share this information. So without further ado, I will go ahead and share my screen. Today we'll be talking about the annual fund and building a communications plan. So let me know, friends, when you can you see my screen? There you go. Can everybody see it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, great. Thanks. So a communications plan, hold on, let me close this. Okay, so the key concepts that we'll talk about today include some basics of fundraising. So before we get to the annual fund and the communications plan, I want to lay the foundation for some key terminology. And so the basis of philanthropy and the theories behind what we do in fundraising include the donor pipeline, the donor life cycle, the gift pyramid, constituent circles, the four-legged stool, the ladder of effectiveness, and different fundraising techniques. So this is a lot of information. It's an entire industry, an entire field that people spend their careers doing. So I'm going to go over lots and lots of information, and I do hope that this will inspire continued interest for future conversations more specifically. So the funding pipeline. In fundraising, everything is based off of building a funding pipeline. How do you get people engaged in your work and to grow in their relationship with your organization and your mission to the point where they are fulfilled emotionally and feel like they're investing in something that's larger than them, and that they can give the largest gift to your organization for your mission of their life. And then it feels great, it's joyful. So it starts with however you get involved, whether it's event attendance or volunteerism, however you engage your people, right? Your constituencies. And then from those people who come to your events or volunteer for you, the first gift, there's a first gift, and you celebrate that, and then you ask them to give every year. And so that becomes your annual gift, right? So if somebody gives you $5 or $500, and then you steward it, you make it feel good, and then you ask them to consider doing that every year. That is your annual fund. And then from your annual fund donors, you can identify people who have the 3 C's. I won't go into too much detail here. We could do another one on major gifts in another session, but from your annual fund, you look at people who have the 3 C's, which is caring, capacity, and connection. So that is your source for major gifts, is your annual fund. The annual fund is the basis for all larger gifts thereafter. And then from major gifts and or from your annual gifts, you can prospect principal gifts. And that's usually, principal giving is usually like the gift of a lifetime. And oftentimes it is in a person's estate, or it is, the remains of a will or trust. But it can also be done in someone's lifetime. If those of you may remember when Maxine Clark and Bob Fox gave $70 million to WashU School of Social Work, that was their gift of a lifetime. They decided that they wanted to enjoy the fruits of their investments in their community during their lifetime. So that's a good example of a living principal gift, but most often it is a posthumous contribution to your organization. So the donor life cycle. This is how an individual or a donor, whether it's a foundation or a corporation, but really mostly individuals, how they come into your organization and how their experience is as a supporter of yours. So it starts with you identify a person, you qualify them, because not everybody is going to be, the best donor to your organization. It should feel good for them. Some people like puppies. Some people like clean water. Everybody has their passions. So you qualify them whether or not they have, and also if they don't have the capacity to give to your organization to make a philanthropic investment, that you shouldn't qualify them, because otherwise you're wasting their time and your resources. And then once you've qualified those individuals and corporations and foundations that you've identified as prospective funders, you cultivate them. You let them get to know about you. You share information with them. You inspire them. You introduce them to program recipients. And then when the time is right, you solicit them. You ask them to support. And here is one thing I will tell you. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. And people enjoy being asked because philanthropy is joyful. And once someone gives to you and invests in your mission, you steward it so they can see the impact of what they just invested in, and that they deserve to feel good for their philanthropy. So that is the donor life cycle, and it starts all over again. And then the next theory in fundraising is the gift pyramid. So the lower level gifts are the onesie, twosies. These are the $5. This is the, $100. This is the, every organization, the level of your gift is different depending on your budget. So like when I was at Fonbon, $10,000 was considered a major gift. Now, when I was at SLU, $25,000 was considered a major gift. And Washington University considers $50,000 a major gift. So everything is to scale. So lower level gifts are all of those many, many gifts that come together to create the foundation of your gift pyramid. And there are many, many more of them. There might be thousands, right? But when you get to, then you go to the annual gifts, and then you get to the major gifts, and then the principal gifts. There might be one principal gift that is worth more money than all of the lower level gifts combined, but you'll never get a principal gift if you don't have the foundation of your gifts. So literally and figuratively, lower level gifts and annual gifts are the foundation of major gifts and principal gifts. Not the best graphic, but it does the job for concentric circles. So when you look at who are you going to ask? Who do you go to prospect, to identify potential supporters? Always look closest home, right? This is your major donors, your board, your managers. Don't shy away from asking people who work at the organization to support the organization. And then from there on out, you go to the volunteers, the employees, the other donors, and then further out, it's the neighbors, the former participants, the former board members, and then you get out then you talk about the state and the country and the world and the universe. You just keep going out, right? But your closest is your concentric circles, and that's where you should focus. And focus first on your closest friends. This is a hilariously bad graphic, but I've used it for so long, and I probably should just draw a new one, but I like this a lot. So in fundraising, there are four legs to the stool. So first, there's the annual fund, which we're going to go into more detail in just a moment. Then there's major gifts, and then there's a capital campaign, which is a whole other topic, and then there's planned giving. We talked about like the principal giving. So ideally, the best funder, the best supporter of your organization gives to all four of these buckets. So somebody might give to you, $1,000 a year, and then you might ask them, hey, we rely on your annual giving, and we really appreciate it. Would you consider a major gift and maintaining your annual gift? And by the way, have you ever considered leaving us in your estate? Or would you make an investment in a building? So it's all part of the conversation, and there's all four of those ways for your best friends and supporters. They can support you in all four of those ways, not just one. So it is important to realize that we can't do everything, right? So knowing that your time is the most valuable resource, the ladder of effectiveness for fundraising techniques is important to consider. You will always be able to have more return on investment from person-to-person solicitation. During COVID, a lot of that did change. People talk on Zoom more, people text more, but at the same time, being with a person in person is always going to be more inspired and produce a higher gift, if you will. So then you go, further down, the less effective, but they still work. Includes, a letter and then phone calls, or many of us get calls from our alma mater and from a student asking for $200 at the end of the year. Phone call solicitations work. But they're not the best, right? So then, impersonal letter, door to door is still, probably not so much anymore, but sales, and then media and advertising. So media and advertising is a form of solicitation, but it's the least effective, but it does support the success of person-to-person solicitations. So here's the last slide before we dive into the nitty-gritty of annual giving. So just looking at the different fundraising techniques, if you were to look at which type of donor would be better solicited by which type of fundraising approach. So for example, if you look at individuals, personal solicitation is always going to be the best, but you can also, I've written many grants or proposals to individuals for their consideration. Individuals get all of our direct mail. We email them, we follow them on social media, we invite them to events, we ask them for planned gifts, all of the things, right? Individuals, you check all of the boxes there. Let's go over all the way to public sources. So, a public source, I'm not going to make a personal solicitation to a governor to ask for their funding choices when they're voting, right? So that might be more of a grant or a proposal or an advocacy, like phone calls. You call your senators, those kinds of things. Going over to corporate. Corporate is probably more grants or proposals and less personal solicitation, unless you have a relationship with the CEO. But so every fundraising technique works better or worse for different types of funders. So that is a good reminder to consider. Okay, so that's the end of fundraising 101 and the foundation of knowledge that I wanted to make sure that we have going into the specifics of annual giving. So annual giving is a nonprofit organization's ongoing fundraising effort. There are two main objectives, and they're to form stronger donor relationships and to raise money for operational expenses. Now that's very important there. Annual fund is something that you should be able to rely on You should be able to rely on a certain percentage, a high percentage of your donors giving to you every year. If you just keep doing the same thing and communicating with them the same way and asking for their support in the same way, they'll continue to support you probably about 80% of the time, 60 to 80% of the time, depending on your constituency. And you can rely on it. You should be able to pay your bills and know that you can sign a lease, on an office, knowing that your annual fund is going to come in if you keep doing the good work that you're doing. So the types of annual giving. So this could be direct mail, email, text is a new, much more prolific use of communication for your annual fund nowadays, especially with COVID, now that everybody's much more informal. And then membership is another one, membership dues, paying for your access to the organization. That's a whole other, like for example, Missouri Botanical Garden, so you pay for a membership there, and that isn't there, you're making a contribution, but you also benefit from it with your membership. Events are a very important way to make sure that you are always on your donor's calendar. If you have an annual event that everyone looks forward to, they might prefer that event, but not the trivia night, but that you're always on their calendar. And it's, if you're on their calendar and they're paying for this event, you're also in their checkbook and in their budget. And then telemarketing. Calling and reminding, like I mentioned, my alma mater calling me and saying, hey, we're really looking forward to your end of year gift, right? So it's an annual thing. So these are the types of annual giving. So one thing that's very important, and I want to make sure that the participants and those of you listening to this, is that you focus on new donor acquisition. Because if you remember, and I should probably put another slide in here for the pipeline. You feed a pipeline, and you communicate with people, so you get the first-time donors, and you get them to be annual donors, and you get them to be major donors. And it's really important to ensure that you're always infusing your donor pool, your pool of supporters, because people age out, they find other organizations, they might pass away, they might move away. So there's a life cycle to it, but you always have to continue to invest in new donors. And so there's lots of ways that you can do that. For new donor acquisition, using direct mail, sometimes you can purchase lists of similar donors that are like yours. There's very sophisticated services available. I mean, it costs, but you can really make a high return on investment if you're smart about it and you engage the right partners in your acquisition. The way that you can assess whether or not an acquisition is working in your direct mail campaign would be the response rate, the average gift, the cost per dollars raised, or the ROI, which are reverse fractions, cost per response, long-term donor value. So that's important. We'll get to that in a minute, because direct mail and new donor acquisition is an investment, and it can take a couple years to pay off, but it works, especially if you are persistent and consistent about it. So once you acquire donors, you want to retain and renew them, and grow them, really. So 5 to 10 times more likely to acquire new versus retain or renew. Recap. Okay, so the idea is to recapture lapsed donors as well. This is a funny industry term. Is LIBUNT, last year, but unfortunately not this. And then SIBUNT is some year, but unfortunately not this. So let's say that somebody, Martha gave to my organization 3 years ago, and she gave to us every year for 5 years, and then 3 years ago we don't know what happened. So we reach out and we re-engage her and we bring her back. That's low-hanging fruit. That at some point she loved you enough to write a check, right? So that at some point she has all of the 3 C's: the caring, capacity, and connection to make a gift to your organization and to support your mission. So your LIBUNTs and SIBUNTs are your lowest hanging fruit for renewed funding. So without doing anything different, only 10 to 25% of your donors will not renew. And then most will renew between 50 and 80%. And that's a statistic that I would say 60% is actually pretty good for a mid-size, somewhat sophisticated organization. If you just keep doing the same every time, but it is something that is organization specific. You can find those types of trends to be consistent year to year. So if you're getting 60% renewal every year and you want to increase it to 70, you need to have a really strong strategy to make that change, because it's pretty set into your organization. So auto renewal is a phenomenal way to ensure continued annual support. As a matter of fact, when you look at auto renewal, monthly giving is an example of an auto renewal. Like, so somebody who gives to you monthly is like 90% likely to come back the next year versus 60% likely of somebody that because you're already, you're already in their budget. That's not, that's not bothering them. That's consistent. They keep hearing from you as long as you're making sure that you're stewarding it and showing the impact of their investment. They'll just keep doing the monthly. It's a phenomenal strategy that I highly recommend for everybody. Okay, so direct mail. This for me, many years ago was an aha moment. If anyone's familiar with the design theory of 60-30-10, it has to do with like color ratios, and I've found that it works very well in many other areas aside from the design theory. Your list, the list of people you mail your direct mail solicitations to, is the most important detail of your direct mail campaign. If you are not focusing on your list and you're focusing more on the offer, like the wording, and like maybe the return on investment, or sometimes people, the March of Dimes, they'll give you, they'll send you a dime in the mail, those kinds of things, that it does affect the effectiveness of your direct mail solicitations, but only 30%. And the creativity and the message only impacts the results by 10%. So if you think about it, your best bet is always to focus on making sure that your list, the people you're sending your solicitation to, is as strong as possible, and that you have an idea of who is your quintessential best donor, and that you figure out who else is like that and make sure that they're on your list and that they're getting your solicitations. And then segmentation. It doesn't factor into the effectiveness of it, but it does personalize it, and it's essential. And I would say by segmentation, I describe it as like a mail merge. So I would say, hey, Maria, we're so grateful for your support this year. Hope you'll consider giving to the Dumaflitchy Fund again this year. And the Dumaflitchy Fund produced this much impact last year, so please consider your support again. Maria, it means so much to the children who benefit from the Dumaflitchies. And so you make sure that you use the person's name, that you indicate to them that you know what they funded, that you indicate to them that their continued support is important and that it makes a difference. And so, but that can all be done by pretty complicated mail merges, or if you use a mail house, they will do that for you too. All right, so this is an interesting tidbit. The return on investment for direct mail can take years. So, especially when you're working with board members who want to know, after you spend a bunch of money on a mailing, how much did you make? You will, but sometimes it takes a couple of years, especially if you're doing acquisition. So if you look at acquisition, you can spend $1.25 or $1.50 for every dollar raised. But if you get, let's say you mail to, you pay for 10 new prospects and 3 of them come in, so you lose some money on it, but you've invested in it. Now you have 3 new donors, and now you want to renew them. And so if you look at the second line here, direct mail renewal. So you've got these 3 new donors that you paid a lot of money for, or that you paid a lot of money for a big mailing and only got 3 new donors. But then the next time the cost is 20 cents for every dollar raised. So it is an upfront investment to build your pipeline to get new donors into your organization and supporting your mission. And what's interesting about these numbers is that I've been doing this a very long time, and I've not seen these percentages change in more than a decade. So it's a very interesting one. Okay, so direct mail components for your annual fund solicitations. Overall package design, the outer envelope letter, the themes and copy, reply envelope, and response device. So now remember that the list, regardless of what your direct mail looks like, your list, who you're sending it to, is always the most important. However, you also want to make it look polished, and you don't want to make it look like you spent so much money that people are like annoyed that you wasted all sorts of money by mailing them something super fancy. So there's a lot of considerations to go into that. So annual fund and annual fundraising has become very sophisticated with technology. And, 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of talk about, the direct mail being dead, that everything's going digital. And, but I mean, when you think about it, when the internet came into place, we still have magazines, right? People still want magazines. People still buy magazines at the store, even if they get a lot of their, information of the same topics from the website or from email. Direct mail and hard copy solicitations and communications will never leave. We will always have it. But what you want is you want to use a multi-channel approach. And it's the same message tailored for each channel, if you will. So let's say you write a letter and you talk about Billy and Billy's, the benefit that Billy got from your organization and how Billy's doing now. And, you can invest in a child like Billy. Okay, so you have Billy, you get a picture of Billy in your mail, right? You have the same picture of Billy in your social media. You might put it on your LinkedIn, you could do Pinterest. I mean, you could do all of them, right? You could do, so Facebook is a big one. Is actually pretty sophisticated and really generous with nonprofits. They don't charge. If you're not fundraising on Facebook and you've got patient or beneficiary stories to tell, it's a phenomenal way to reverberate the same message that you're sending via email and text. And Facebook is a very good one, but any social media really. And it should be the same. People are always hesitating to say, well, we already told them about Billy. Yeah, but the thing is, people are busy. So they got your message about Billy at home in their mail, and it's sitting on a pile for their end of year giving. But then they're tired and they're winding down for the day, and they hop on Facebook and they see Billy. Oh yeah, Billy, that was in the thing. And then a week later, you send them an email that says, hey, remember Billy? He's doing great, and it's because of you. And they might be like, oh gosh, yeah, Billy. So the multi-channel approach creates a familiarity of your message and makes it feel more personal instead of repetitive, right? But now you don't use the same, you don't, in your emails, you don't send, or in your social media posts, you don't send like a full page email or a full page letter like you do in the mail. You tailor it to the format. And so it's the same story, but just tailored to different formats and all of your platforms. So telemarketing. Okay, so there's a lot of legislation against it now. It makes it harder for people to find your phone numbers, and you can get on a do not call list. It's also it's very expensive to pay somebody to sit there and make phone calls. That's why a lot of telemarketers are working in countries that have much lower cost of labor. And then, also you could do volunteers, but are they going to be as good as a paid telemarketer or a paid person calling for you? Sometimes they'll do better. But if you do have like a phone-a-thon at the end of the year, and you ask your volunteers and your board members to come out and call all your supporters and remind them of your end of year giving campaign, make sure they're trained, because volunteer versus paid can be really good. Somebody that's passionate about your work, that knows the impact of somebody's support, can do a phenomenal job, but they can also be nervous and feel unprepared, and so it can kind of backfire. So there's benefits to both, but and then automation. In higher ed, some of the more sophisticated telemarketing things, they sit there, and when they get off the call, then the next call calls them. And then their computer screen pops up with, Kitty funded biology in 2016. And, she now works at, SSM. So there's a lot of automation, making it easier to make more calls and to call more supporters and ask for more support from as many people as possible. So with the analysis of this, like some of the things that is, if you're having a bunch of people make these phone calls for you, how can you tell if it's working? So you look at completion rate, pledge rate, average pledge, and the fulfillment of those pledges. And then the last on the annual fund will be, I'm bringing it back to the donor pipeline. I referenced it earlier, while annual fund is an opportunity for people to support you and your mission every year. It is important, and I mentioned earlier about getting on people's calendars. So special events are very important to make sure that people feel engaged and that they have a way to be involved other than just writing a check, that they can feel it, that they can invite friends to come and see why they're passionate about your work. And it does, you do feed that pipeline by event attendance and volunteerism. So special events are a critical point for donors to enter your funding funding cycle, and to become part of your annual fund. Okay, so transitioning now from the annual fund and what it is and why it's important to more specific, like how are you going to go about planning for your communications. So there's internal and external communications, and then there's some that overlap. I love Venn diagrams. So internal communications might be your intranet, your communications among colleagues via email or phone calls, meetings, those kinds of things. External is obvious, right? You've got the advertising, you've got the mail, you've got conferences, speaking opportunities, and then the blended ones include, website, social media, flyers, events, because those types of communications include your internal constituencies and the whole world, anybody that you can engage. So when you're looking at your communications, it's important that when you're putting your calendar together, that what are you trying to achieve? What are your objectives? And by when? Okay, this is, it should be smart. What you want, you want to raise $100,000 for the Duma-Flici Fund by 12/31/22. And so if that's your objective, then you put the production timeline together, like what needs to happen and when. You learn about your audience. So this is a really important part. I mentioned earlier, and when you start getting into very sophisticated annual giving campaigns and direct mail campaigns, you can take your best donor. So let's say you realize that your most consistent and most generous annual fund donors are 64 to 69-year-old Hispanic males who live in the greater St. Louis area. And so you know that those people, those, you know, that characteristic or those characteristics are people who have been very generous with you. So how do you go about finding more uh, men of 64 to 60, or what did I say, 64 to 79, whatever the age range is, and then other characteristics that might also be inspired to support you. So you find what those characteristics are, and then that's how you can, you know, target your communications to that audience. You can work with a vendor to do acquisition of how do you find people, how do you get in front of people of that age range and that background. And then so that way you get more people who are just like your best donors. And then you look for opportunities for collaboration. So like what organizations, what other organizations, what holidays do people of that, those characteristics celebrate? Do you like, is it, you know, is there a zip code where that has a high percentage of people with those characteristics? And so you look for ways to communicate with them. So let's say, you know, we talked about Hispanic males, you know, maybe some Cinco de Mayo, that's probably a very bad example, but you know, something that would resonate with Hispanic males, right? You look for ways to, an excuse to reach out and celebrate their support of your organization, but also something that they might resonate with them. And then you know, your messaging. Remember when we talked about how 60, 30, 10, your list is the most important, but your messaging is also important. It's 30% of the impact is from your messaging. So, and then you build the content, and then the schedule, and you put it into a calendar format. So there's no confusion about who's doing what when, and that you can look at your entire calendar year. I do this in Excel, and so I can sort it. But you know, there's software that does this for you. But for smaller, more scrappy organizations, Excel is great. But if you don't plan for your follow-up to, let's say you remember you're doing the multi-channel marketing. So you have this story about Billy that you mail to people at their house. And then you know that if you put it in the mail on Monday, it'll be at their home by Friday. So the following week, you're gonna talk about Billy on social media. And then you might send an email at the end of the next week that, hey, you know, you saw Billy on our social media and we sent something in the mail and wanted to make sure that you had a chance via email to learn more about Billy, and click here to support Billy. But that's a lot, you know, so that's many touch points. And if you don't coordinate it, then you'll either do it way too far out, or it should be very strategic and timed perfectly. And the only way to do that is to look, ahead 6 to 8 weeks, if not the entire year ahead. So, and this is the last slide on this, because one thing that we can cover in a future topic when we talk about major gifts is how annual fund and the communications planning can play into major gifts. So when you are working to secure major gifts, it can take years. It could take 2 to 3 years from the first time that you meet a prospective donor to the time that you have an opportunity to sit down with them and ask them for a significant contribution to your mission. And that's where the annual fund and the direct mail and the multi-channel marketing comes in, because, you know, if you as a fundraiser are just the only way that the organization ever hears from the donor ever, if you as a fundraiser are the only person who ever reaches out to a donor about their support, then you're too much of a bottleneck. So the communications calendar and the annual fund and direct mail, including the multi-channel follow-up, can make a major gift solicitation more successful. And so it can be, 18 to 24 moves. I might say, call somebody once a month or every other month for the first year, and then we get coffee, and then, but in the meantime, they're still hearing about Billy from Billy. They got that thing in the mail. Oh yeah, I love that story, and I'm so happy for Billy. And oh, I saw that on So's Facebook. That was great. I'm so happy for you. As a fundraiser, I might print out a Billy story and send it to him and be like, hey, Martha, I know that, Billy's story really resonated with you. Thought you'd appreciate this update. So that's moves management. And that is a philosophy for how to approach donors and prospective donors as a fundraiser in a way that is strategic and thoughtful, but also considerate of the donor. It may seem disingenuous to have a strategy for how to engage someone with a relationship, but at the same time, it's quite the opposite. People who want to invest philanthropically in your mission deserve to have effort put into their engagement. And because at the end of the day, when they make an investment in you and in your organization, your mission, it's joyful for them. And at the end of the day, people just want to live forever, and they want to feel good about where they contribute their time, talent, and treasure. And putting a strategy like moves management in place is a larger umbrella strategy for ensuring a stellar donor experience that all plays into the communications calendar and your annual fund solicitation strategy. So we can cover that moves management in a future if there's interest in discussing major gifts and solicitation strategies. So I welcome questions and I welcome feedback and interest in future additional conversations about annual fund. And if there are questions from people who watch this recording and they would like to schedule something in the future to focus specifically and not hypothetically on their organization, I'm very open to that as well. It's a pleasure to contribute to the Hispanic Chamber's excellent contributions to the community, and whatever I can do to support the Hispanic community here in St. Louis, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Kitty, for doing this workshop for us. I hope that a lot of people get a lot of positive things from this. Like Kitty said, this was recorded, so when you guys are looking at this, it'll be recorded. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the comments, because this will be on our social media and on our website. So if you guys have any comments, you can always write it there, and we'll answer that for you. Don't forget, like I said earlier, we won't have a workshop next Wednesday, but we will have one on September 28th, creating a development plan that works. So thank you, Kitty, for being with us again. And this has been the end. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.